The studio that night had a strange feeling, like the space was holding its breath, waiting for something to take shape. I, Jermaine Jackson, still get chills when I think back to that moment because it was so real, so sharp, so like a film I could never fast forward. It was the night a regular janitor, someone I never thought would have anything to do with music history, accidentally caught my brother Michael doing something that would change the world. The practice room had only a few weak fluorescent lights. The flickering light cast long, misty streaks across the worn wooden floor. Outside the glass doors, the parking lot was empty, save for the night watchman's van. The air was cold, and there was a faint smell of old wood and sweat, making the space feel like a box full of secrets. According to the night watchman's account, a story that took me a few minutes to digest, he hadn't intended to stop by the gym. He just intended to do his usual chores, collect the trash, lock the door, check the electricity, but as he passed the gym, he heard a strange, unnatural sound of footsteps. It was like the floorboards breathing, he told me later. Curious, he opened the door, and at that moment he saw Michael. Not the familiar Michael from the stage, not the Michael shining under the lights, but the Michael of his loneliest hours when creativity was tearing at his heart and body. My brother stood in the middle of the room, his white shirt soaked with sweat, his black fedora tilted slightly over one eye. But what stunned the night watchman wasn't the sight, but the way Michael moved, his feet sliding backward so smoothly that the floor lights couldn't even register it. The night watchman said, "I swear, Jermaine, the floor wasn't moving, but he was." He emphasized that a third time, as if he couldn't believe what he had seen. At the time, Michael didn't know anyone was watching. He was engaged in a silent dialogue with himself. My brother's legs slid back inch by inch, then stopped abruptly as if glued to the floor, then slid again, then turned, then leaned. His entire body seemed to defy the laws of physics, but at the same time obeyed a secret law that only Michael knew. The night watchman said that for a moment he thought Michael disappeared, not in a supernatural sense, but because my brother moved so lightly, so quickly, so silently, like a shadow that had detached itself from its host body. Of course, all of this, he admitted, could be just lighting effects and personal anecdotes, but the fact that it made such an impression was a testament to Michael's absolute focus. I was completely oblivious to it at the time. I only heard about it the next morning when the night watchman pulled me aside in a hallway, his voice low as if afraid to disturb something sacred. "Jermaine," he said, his eyes still wide with astonishment, "I think I just saw the future." I frowned. He continued, "He slid across the floor as if he were going back in time. I've never seen anyone move like that. I really thought, he was going to explode." I was both worried and proud to hear him say it. Michael had always been someone who pursued things bigger than his own dreams, but the idea that he'd trained to the point of making others surprised, almost to the point of panic, troubled me. I knew my brother was passionate. I knew he was serious, but I didn't know he spent his lonely nights creating a dance move no one had ever seen before. I asked him more specifically, "What did you see that you thought would change the future?" He closed his eyes as if trying to remember every detail. I saw his feet moving like they were sliding on ice, but there was no ice. There was nothing on the floor. There was just him and a movement I couldn't describe. Then he concluded with a line that I'll never forget. "If the world ever sees this, it'll never forget it." When he said that, I didn't say another word. Part of me was overwhelmed, and part of me felt as if a secret door had opened, a door to what my brother was secretly building. I looked into the empty gym at the silent wooden floor, and though I couldn't see it with my own eyes, I could feel the traces of burning footsteps that had just been left there. That night, the wooden floor shook not because of the wind or the music. It shook because a genius was testing his own limits, and an ordinary witness, a night watchman, had accidentally seen the moment when history began to move silently. I remember that evening vividly, an evening where the air seemed thick with tension. When I entered the practice room, I didn't hear Michael's familiar music, the rhythmic tapping of his feet, or the sound of him singing a rough verse as usual. Instead, there was an unnatural silence, a silence that sent a chill down my spine. Michael was sitting in the middle of the room, one hand on the floor, the other clutching his ankle. There were no spotlights, no cheers, no glamour, just a young artist struggling with his own body. "Michael," I called softly, as if afraid to break whatever fragile concentration was enveloping my brother. He looked up, his face covered in sweat, and for the first time in all the time I'd spent watching him practice, I saw in Michael's eyes a look of disappointment mixed with pain, an emotion Michael usually kept hidden deep inside. "Jermaine," he smiled slightly, but it was so crooked it made me cringe. "It has to look like magic, but it feels like fire." The words kept ringing in my head. Magic, fire, magic, but at the cost of fire. I looked down at the wooden floor, sweat streaks, streaks of sweat, as if Michael had slipped on it 1,000 times in just a few hours. The shoe on his left foot looked so bad I thought it was about to fall apart. The heel was worn smooth as if it had been rubbed against the floor 100 times. I sat down next to Michael. "How long have you been practicing?" He let out a soft breath. Maybe 3-4 hours. But I knew it was much more. Every time Michael said 3-4 hours, he was pushing the limits of what a normal person could endure. Michael twisted his ankle trying to stand, but as soon as he put his foot down, he collapsed. I caught him before he fell. "Michael, you're in so much pain and you're still trying." Before I could finish, he shook his head. "Jermaine," Michael said, his voice so low I had to lean in to hear, "you don't understand. I have to make it perfect, not beautiful, but perfect." He placed 2 fingers on his chest, emphasizing each word as if to stamp it on his heart. "I feel this move. It's like something I've never touched before, but my body can't keep up. I have to force it. I have to make it listen." I looked into Michael's eyes and I could see the tension clearly. Not the tension of an ordinary artist, but the struggle of a genius trying to break the boundaries he himself had set. I saw fear, I saw doubt, and I saw the fire too, the light that made Michael Michael. I was afraid people wouldn't understand, he admitted. What if they thought it was weird? What if they didn't see what I was trying to show them? Michael rarely let his insecurities show, but that night he seemed to crumble before me, an artist crushed by his own dreams. I didn't say anything right away. I just put a hand on Michael's shoulder. "You've created something no one else has ever done. You can't ask your body to learn it right away. No one can. You're building something bigger than you think." Michael didn't answer. He glanced toward the mirror he'd turned and faced 1,000 times. Then he stood up, slowly, like someone trying to stand on the ground after a storm. "Look," he whispered. Michael put his left foot forward, his right foot back. The movement seemed simple. Then he leaned over, sliding his left foot back a little. His right followed, fluid as flowing water. I watched without blinking. Even in pain, Michael maintained incredible precision. But then the movement stopped. My brother bit his lip, his face contorted with pain in his ankle. I started to run, but Michael held up a hand, signaling him to stop. "No, let me try again." And so he tried again, even though his body protested every movement, each slide, each twist, each glide. All carried a fierce determination, but also a painful tug of war between ideal and reality. I could see the fatigue eating away at Michael's every breath, but at the same time I saw something else, an almost defiant stubbornness of art. After the 3rd try, he stopped, breathing heavily. Michael's eyes flashed as if he'd just found his way through a maze. "Jermaine, I know I'm almost there. I can feel it right now." He put his hand on his chest again. "I just need my body to cooperate a little more." I wanted to tell him to stop. I wanted to tell him that no one was forcing him to be a superhero, but I also knew if I stopped him then, I would be taking away the chance for my brother to have the moment Michael was looking for, the moment that could change my brother's career. So I just sighed and said, "Then I'm here. Wherever you go, I'll be there." Michael looked at me, just a little, but enough for me to see the gratitude and pain mixed in his eyes. And so, in that small, sweaty, gasping, breathing, creaking-floored gym, I stood there, next to a genius battling with his own legs. A battle no one could see, a battle only those closest to him could understand. To reach the miracle, one must go through the fire. I met the night watchman again on a gloomy morning when the dew still lingered on the studio glass, and the sunlight was not strong enough to dispel the chill of the night. He stood in the hallway, his hands clasped together, as if he were trying to hold back something that had been building up inside him for too long. I could tell from his eyes that he had something to say, and it was no small matter. "Jermaine, I have to tell you something," he said, his voice still trembling as if he was afraid someone would hear. I nodded. following him to the corner of the deserted hallway. He looked around one last time before speaking, as if afraid that an important secret was about to be blown away by the wind. "I saw him more than you think," he said. "Not just one night." My heart skipped a beat. "What did you say?" The night watchman took a deep breath. "I've wanted to tell him this for a long time, but I was afraid to bother him because I knew he was pursuing something big. But Jermaine, he wasn't just practicing a new technique, he was fighting it." The words stuck in my head. Fighting. I'd seen Michael exhausted, in pain, but from the perspective of an outsider, witnessing moments that even the family didn't know about, it had a completely different nuance. "I used to work the night shift," he continued, "and every time I walked past the practice room, I'd hear the wood floor creaking. I thought it was a mouse running, or the old air conditioner kicking in, but no, it was him." He paused, then emphasized, "Every night." I was silent, not out of surprise, but out of guilt. Michael was so good at hiding things from everyone. He chose not to bother anyone, not to want anyone to worry, and use the darkness as his ally. "I saw him play with that slide," he continued. "Some nights he would do it 100 times. Every time he slid, the light reflected off his feet seemed to bend, or maybe it was just the low light creating an illusion." He quickly added, "I know it's probably just a rumor that I'm imagining, but I really felt like I was looking at something that not everyone else could see." He described the first time he was truly haunted by the way Michael moved. He stood there silent and then suddenly slid backward, so fast that I had to hold onto the door frame, not because I was scared, but because I didn't want to miss it. His whole body was floating. I swallowed the strange feeling rising in my chest. It was exactly what I saw when I watched Michael practice. He didn't jump. He didn't step. He glided. "I have to tell you this," the night watchman said, his voice becoming serious. "One night I saw him stop mid-step. He was clutching his knee as if it was in pain, but instead of resting, he jumped up and tried again." I closed my eyes. The scene was so familiar, as if copied from my own memory. Michael was always like that. When he reached the edge of his limit, he didn't back down. He pushed harder. But then he lowered his voice. What sent a chill down my spine was what happened afterward. I opened my eyes. "What?" He licked his lips, fumbling with his words as if trying to avoid misinterpretation. "I saw his shadow on the floor." I frowned. "What about Michael's shadow?" he said slowly. His shadow slid the other way. I froze. He quickly raised his hand, almost apologetically. I know it sounds like a rumor, and it could very well have been a faulty light, a flickering bulb that created the wrong effect. But, Jermaine, it felt real. I had to stand there and watch for a long time to make sure I wasn't seeing things. A chill ran down my spine, not because I thought it was weird, but because I knew exactly what it meant. Michael had achieved a level of concentration and speed that fooled even the human eye. "I've seen a lot of artists practice," he said, "but none have ever made me freeze like that. There was a moment when I thought I was witnessing something beyond human capability, but I guess it was just the dim light changing the shape of the shadow." He chuckled awkwardly. "I don't want to exaggerate." I put my hand on his shoulder. "I understand, and thank you for saying it." The night watchman let out a sigh of relief, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. But before I left, he called back, "There's one more thing." I turned. "I think he's getting closer to what he's looking for," he said. "Every night his slides are clearer, more certain. It's like he's chasing an invisible line, and now he's just inches away from it." I stood still for a few seconds, a thrill spreading through my chest. "Jermaine," he said, his voice firm, "if the world saw what I saw, it would change everything." In that moment, I knew Michael wasn't just practicing. He was weaving what would become an icon. And the night watchman, an unwitting witness, had seen the first pieces of that legend before any of us had. The day was closer than we thought, the day Michael would take the mysterious dance move that had haunted him for months on stage in front of millions. The atmosphere backstage at Motown 25 was strange, a mixture of anticipation and tension from an unseen storm. I leaned against the wall, watching my brother from a distance. Michael sat silently, twirling his fedora. No one spoke to anyone. There was no laughter, no joking around like at any other performance. The silence seemed to weigh down on everyone's chests, but heaviest on Michael's shoulders. I moved closer. "Are you okay?" I asked quietly. Michael didn't look at me right away. He just took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on his old shoes, the heels so worn that I'd told him to change them, but Michael said no. Shoes that fit your feet are the ones that get you to the right feeling, he said. Finally, he raised his head to look at me. That look was a strange mixture of nervousness, excitement, and a vague worry, a vulnerability Michael rarely showed. "Jermaine," he said, his voice low but clear, "do you think they'll understand?" I paused. I knew he was talking about that slide, the slide that had creaked the studio floor every night, that had hurt Michael's ankle, that had worried and amazed the whole family. "Michael," I said softly, "they won't just understand, they'll be blown away." But Michael shook his head, his expression serious this time. "No, Jermaine, I don't want them to just like me. I want them to believe me. I want them to feel what I feel." I knew those weren't the words of a mere dancer. They were the words of someone rewriting the rules of an entire field. He stood up, turned his wrists slightly, and took a few tentative steps on the floor. Not a full moonwalk, just warm-up steps, but even those small movements were enough for me to feel something invisible vibrating around him. The stage was buzzing outside. The director was passing by, urging him on. Other performers were getting ready. But Michael stood there completely detached from the chaos, as if a transparent glass wall was enveloping him. I watched him move, and I remembered the words of the night watchman. He's only inches away from that thing. Something in Michael's breathing, in the way he tilted his head, in each shift of weight from one foot to the other, signaled that the moment was approaching. "Michael," I called, "you're shaking." He chuckled. "You're not shaking because you're scared, Jermaine. You're shaking because you're not sure your body will follow your will." He put his hand to his chest. "In my head, that step is so clear, but when I perform, one wrong move and everything falls apart." I wanted to tell him that no one was demanding that perfection from him, but I knew that would be meaningless, because the one demanding perfection was Michael and no one else. "I want to show you something," I said. I took a few steps back, mimicking his stance as he began his skate. Michael laughed, his first real laugh in days of tension. "Jermaine, if you do that, the audience will remember." "Then you must do better than me," I teased back. Michael finished laughing, his expression softening. A brief relief passed through him, as if the pressure had just eased a little. But then from outside came a loud shout, "Michael, 2 minutes!" The air instantly froze. Michael turned his head and looked at me, and I saw in that moment a Michael who was both my little brother and the man about to make history. He stepped closer to me. "Jermaine, if I mess up," I put my hands on his shoulders. "You can't mess up because you're not just dancing. You're telling a story, and that story belongs to you." Michael was silent for a few seconds. Then he whispered, "I'm just afraid that what I see in my head won't appear exactly as it appears to them." I looked deep into my brother's eyes, so let them see with their hearts. That's when Michael's body changed, as if every worry, every doubt was reduced to a speck, then pushed down to the pit of his stomach to make room for absolute concentration. He pulled his fedora down, a small movement, but enough for me to understand. Michael had locked the fear away. He turned and walked out onto the stage through a long, brightly lit hallway. I followed, close enough to hear him take one last deep breath before stepping out of the darkness. Just before the light at the end of the hallway, Michael stopped. He didn't turn around, he just said one sentence. "Jermaine, if this works, I know it will change everything." I replied, "I know, and you deserve it." Michael walked out, the stage light swallowed him, and I stood in the darkness, listening to the audience roar, my heart pounding like it was going to burst out of my chest. It was the moment before history changed course, a fragile moment, but powerful enough to turn the world upside down in one fell swoop. When Michael stepped onto the Motown 25 stage, I stood in the wings, my heart pounding so hard I could almost hear it through my shirt. The white lights enveloped him, like a bright stream of water rolling across the stage. The audience began to cheer, cheers not simply because they knew Michael Jackson was about to perform, but because they sensed something special was about to happen. The entire studio was almost shaking, but inside me, the storm was quiet, not loud but heavy. This was the moment The moment when all the sweaty nights, all the painful slides, all the times Michael gritted his teeth, would answer in one fell swoop. Billie Jean rang out. The first few bars were familiar, but there was something sharper, deeper, more urgent. Michael tipped his fedora down, his white-gloved hand gently touching it. The light on the white glove made it sparkle like a star that had just fallen to the stage. Then he started moving. A familiar, breathtakingly precise sequence of movements. Each spin, each little heel kick, each shoulder roll, all like a pen drawing a smooth curve in the air. The whole room cheered with each movement, but I knew everyone, like me, was waiting for one thing only. The moment came when Michael suddenly stood still, straightened, then bowed his head slightly as if talking to himself. There was a moment of silence, as if time were gathering momentum. Then he slid. Not a normal backstep, not a simple technical move, but a backstep so perfect that no one had time to define it. Michael slid backward as if the floor were smeared with invisible grease, as if gravity had been reversed, as if his body had chosen to defy all normal laws. People used to call it the moonwalk, but that moment it wasn't a jump. It was a shock. I heard the audience gasp. That's right, they didn't cheer right away. They held their breath. A few seconds later, the screams exploded like a storm. People jumped from their seats. Some held their heads. Others pointed at the stage, mouths wide open, speechless. The camera shook slightly. The cameraman was clearly so shocked he forgot to steady himself. Michael continued skating a few more steps, then spun, leaping into a razor-sharp motion. He finished decisively frozen, white gloves raised, eyes unblinking. The audience erupted. I stood backstage, my chest tightening, not from surprise, but from the fact that I had just been hit with this. I was witnessing a moment that people would talk about over and over again, a moment that millions would watch, analyze, learn from, a moment where history had just turned before my eyes. Michael stepped into the darkness of the wings, breathing heavily, sweat rolling down his temples, but his eyes were strangely bright. "Jermaine," he whispered, "you did it, right?" I couldn't speak. I just hugged him. We were both shivering, not from the cold, but from the knowledge that the world had just witnessed what only those closest to him knew. Michael had won an invisible war that only he dared to face. When I let him go, I saw a sight that stopped me. The night watchman. He stood in the audience near the aisle, his eyes red as if he had seen something sacred. No one paid any attention to him in the sea of screaming people, but I could see his hands shaking. He looked at me, then at Michael. As Michael drew closer, he said only one sentence, his voice breaking. I knew the world would remember. Michael paused. He recognized him. A small smile appeared on Michael's lips, not as bright as on stage, but small, real, like the smile of someone grateful for his first witness. I looked at the two of them, a genius and an ordinary night watchman, standing side by side amid the thunderous noise. And I realized something. History is not just written by the names of those who stand in the spotlight, but also by those who quietly look from the shadows and believe in what the world has not seen. When the show ended, when the lights went down and people began to leave the auditorium, Michael turned back to look at the stage. He said nothing. He didn't need to say anything, because everything was answered by those 3 perfect seconds of sliding backward. 3 seconds were enough to change the future. 3 seconds were enough to etch Michael Jackson's name into the pages of performing arts history. 3 seconds were enough for all of us, the spectators, to never look at the parquet floor the same way again. And I, Jermaine Jackson, will never forget the moment the world held its breath and then slid back down with my brother.